Oh, hey everybody! Thank you for listening to me speak, and I'll tell you a little bit about FilmTrack. I'm going to talk a little bit about rights management. It's very exciting to be here, right next door to Gold's Gym. It's like my second home, as you can no doubt tell from my physique. I wear baggy clothes to hide it. I don't want, you know. Anyway, who is FilmTrack? Who am FilmTrack? FilmTrack, more companies rely on FilmTrack for their contract and rights management than any other solution in the world. Oh, look, it's down here too. That's really cool. I don't even have to look that way. So this is going to be a fairly informal presentation about FilmTrack, about rights management, about the siloing of rights management and metadata, and how all of that is coming together in a new world that we're engaged in, a brave new world. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about FilmTrack, and then I'm going to get into the specifics of this presentation. So we are the global standard in enterprise contract and rights management for media and entertainment. You can see just some of the logos there that we work with. About 30% of our business is outside the United States. We work with companies that are financiers, producers, sales agents, distributors, content creators, all along the value chain. Anybody who has any interest whatsoever in the rights management of their IP, of their intellectual property, along with the financial considerations that go with that rights management, that go with that with those distribution concepts. And I'll be speaking about how rights management and financials have to wed together in order to have a very thorough supply chain, an accurate supply chain. We're backed by Insight Venture Partners, which is a $13.5 billion fund, pretty big fund, and they've backed little guys like I think Twitter and Tumblr and guys like that. So hopefully we're in nice company. We have an extensive ecosystem. Many of the folks here, many of the folks both from a strategic standpoint and technology standpoint. We've done 2 acquisitions over the last 2 years, and we're actually in the midst of 2 additional acquisitions. And these acquisitions are all about extending our presence both in the adjacent verticals, for example, consumer products and toys and so forth, but also extending our functionality and geographic reach. And we've helped our clients for the last over 15 years uncover literally billions and billions of dollars of untapped revenue by exposing the availability pockets of their library and helping them not only exploit it and sell it, but also make sure that when they do sell it, they actually get paid. So hopefully we serve a fairly important role. And I like to think of rights management as very sexy. Present company excluded, but I don't know. Rights management is a necessity for proper function of an intellectual property business. Intellectual property business is almost all of our businesses these days, whether you're trafficking in television, in film, in music, or the games that are inspired thereof, video games, or you're working on second cycle sales of those. You need to know what is available, what you've sold to whom, to where, for which language, for which media, and it's not a binary equation. This is not a system or a business that lends itself towards a simple inventory of, I have this title, I've sold this title, I don't have this title. It's a much more complex, we like to call it multivariate problem. It's a Rubik's Cube of territory, language, media, channel, time, and what I call state, the nature of the grant. Is the grant exclusive or non-exclusive? Is it a holdback? Is it a blackout? Is it an option, etc.? And then all of those characteristics of territory and time must be calculated from a rights-in standpoint, meaning what rights you've either acquired or generated as a function of creating your content versus the rights out. What have you distributed? And then the delta is what is available. And that delta is the holy grail that everybody's aiming for, and there's a lot of different ways of looking at that delta. That delta being, show me what's available that's never been exploited before in Germany for pay TV. Show me what's been exploited before in Germany for free TV, but it's now available to be sold again. Show me what's never been exploited before in Germany for the Russian language, because there's now a lot of Russian emigres in Germany that we want to sell this content in Russian language. Now, by the way, I also want to see if I have Russian language tracks for this said title. So it's a very important aspect, if not the most important aspect of of the digital supply chain, of the content supply chain. Moreover, it's not something that exists in a vacuum. It is an emergent property of the contracts that one puts in. Meaning, when we create content or when we acquire content, we create what we call a rights-in agreement, or an acquisition agreement, a creation agreement that defines what rights you hold, right? And then that is really the basis for all of your rights discussions downstream. So the underlying rights, as you move forward, they may get affected by different distribution agreements. There may be 5 different parties trading in these rights as it goes down the supply chain. But it's important to have a contract, a legal agreement that defines that pace. So as you said, it's not binary. And the other important piece is the complexity of this is increasing. Obviously, as we have more and more ways of distributing content, I used to jokingly say 10, 15 years ago, I was like, one day there'll be like holographic distribution. And there is now, of course, holographic distribution, VR. The means of distribution is evolving, but the means for tracking that distribution has not evolved. You'd be stunned to hear what some of the major studios and players here in Los Angeles are using to track their rights, where they have just now caught up to the notion that there's DVDs, just in time for DVDs to go away. So the financial complexity, the legal complexity makes it its own universe, and the financial complexity needs to be related to the rights complexity, and that's often a consideration that's not contemplated when looking at the scenarios. So the questions that our clients or any user is asking themselves when they have a content library is, am I fully exploiting this library? I just bought this library. I'm this company in Qatar that just bought the Miramax library yesterday. Am I fully exploiting it? FilmTrack client, by the way. Can I get an answer to you ASAP? A buyer from Australia just called me up. He needs to buy documentaries for his new VOD platform. Can I tell him or her instantly what's available for Australia? Or do I have to say to him, I'll email something to you next week, because if I do that, I've lost the deal, just like in any business, right? So I need instant access to information. Can I assign a value to my content? Meaning, I'm going to get a loan from one of these big cats, and they are evaluating my library, doing a library evaluation. The library is a function not so much of how great my titles are, but how much more I can exploit from it. So the library content is not just how much people owe me, but the terminal value of what is available and what I could get on those unexploited assets. So that's an answer you can only get if you have a very robust and I'll call it discrete rights management system, where you can carve into as small nuggets as possible to be able to sell your data, not sell your data, sell your content. I'll give you an example. The formerly mentioned Miramax, when they were initially acquired from Disney, once again spun off as their own company, they switched from using a legacy system to using FilmTrack. And they went from a certain run rate in terms of the entire Miramax library, which, as we all know, is a very high-profile library. They had, in 1 year, a 6x multiple on their library because of, they went to a pretty astonishing run rate because their sales team was able to very quickly isolate the pockets of availability. They were able to make deals with Netflix and others very quickly around the world and say, hey, the English patient is still available for the UK for free TV rights, or we never exploited Latin American rights for Clerks 2 or what have you, or we have remake rights here that we didn't realize for Bad Santa, so now there's a Bad Santa 2. Yes, you're welcome. And of course, all of this is under the rubric of, can I increase revenue? Can I increase revenue with my current content? Can I make decisions about future content based on where I'm seeing the rights trending presently? Right now, if you look at certain studios and businesses, they have isolated rights management into various silos. They may have international in one silo, domestic in another, home ent in another, VOD in yet another, etc. And that is a very troublesome scenario because you're not getting the synergies you would and the understanding you would about your overall library, but also the data is asynchronous. You do a deal over here that this department doesn't know about, and you're creating a scenario where, because your domestic deals may, for example, go into Mexico and Canada and also parts of Puerto Rico, they're impacting your international deals. So it's really imperative that the barriers break down between your various business units in order to have a very supple rights management scenario. As you can see, the spend is $4.2 trillion, and that IP value is $7 trillion. The numbers are just astronomically high. And a lot of people here, and a lot of our colleagues talk a lot about asset management systems, and we play with them. They're our friends and colleagues, peace and love, peace and love. But asset management cannot exist in isolation, independent of rights management. Having the assets is vital, but knowing, okay, I have the rights to this, therefore I can exploit this or not exploit this, or I have the French language track available. It's really vital that all of this gets connected, and that you have a system or a series of systems that are interconnected that allow you to do this. And I'll talk a little bit about FilmTrack's philosophy about this. We're a cloud-based SaaS solution that's very API-centric, so that we can integrate easily with whether you have a separate DAM system, your accounting system, or ERP solution, so that we like to keep things all connected. So I'm sure as the attendees here realize, and by the very presence of the building, the very temple that we are in, all praise be, we have a lot of different models of transactions. And these transactions now require more and more visibility into the underlying rights and the royalties. And by royalties, I mean any incoming or outgoing funds in terms of the revenue that's coming in and the payments or participations outbound that you have to make. And the complexity of that as relates to rights is pretty profound. So you have companies obviously like Netflix and Hulu and the MCNs, and you have the consumer product people, and you have broadcasters, et cetera. And the type of content based on one IP might be toys, digital downloads, DVDs, apparel, accessories, live events, etc. All of those have rights, legal rights. And by the way, when I speak about rights, I'm talking about legal rights, what we call in the industry as legal avails. In other words, what the contract says. There's also a term we talk about called commercial avails, which is the windowing process, which is which we handle as well. But oftentimes those two are conflated, and I want to make a distinction there for posterity. When 1,000 years from now, when this is on Earth, they're like, that guy was not accurate. I want them to say, no, he was right on the money. So royalty considerations, I'll talk a lot about this because that's how most of our clients get paid. Okay, they distribute their content to an SVOD system, or they're still selling units of DVDs somewhere, or people are attending theater showings, or they're showing it on TV, et cetera. And then the reporting comes back, and that's where everything is right now a mess. There are no standards there. But what we've created is a mechanism where at least you can consume the reports that are coming to you, validate them against your contracts, and then calculate your royalties, whether it's royalties flowing in or royalties flowing out, based on the equations that are set up in your agreements. The problem with these agreements are sometimes they're drafted by very smart MBAs sitting in conference rooms in Century City, but more oftentimes they're contracted by salespeople having a cocktail at the south of France in Cannes, and sometimes they don't actually make sense, believe it or not, because after you've had a few cocktails, your legal brain seems to go off to Margaritaville. And so it's really vital that you have a royalty machine, if you will, that can calculate in light of the rights that are allowed to be exploited, validate the rights, and also calculate, okay, you've sold, my contract says for every 10,000 views I get this, above this it goes up to 7.8%, but not to exceed 10%, but if I cross this threshold, it does that. And these are fun little, for those of us who loved math in high school and college and grad school, all of us, all two of us, this is really exciting stuff because we get to build basically a math machine that can do pretty much anything. So as folks invent different scenarios around tiering and pricing, and it's this way only for Canada, but if it is in French, it goes this way, and all these sort of scenarios that we have to contemplate on any of those vectors I discussed earlier. So in the first 6 months, the rates are like this. In the second 6 months, they're like this. Except if this happens, then it's like that. And you need a system that can do it. You can't do this on Excel unless you're only dealing with, say, 50 of these statements a year. We have seen that there's a threshold. And after 50, humanity breaks down. And, it's just like The Walking Dead. There's no, well, I guess the new social contract comes up, Rick's in charge and all that. But you really need a system to manage your royalties after you get to a certain level, particularly if you're dealing with SKU level agreements as well, meaning a lot of times you're dealing with intellectual property sales. I sold this title to Bulgaria for theatrical release, but a lot of times you're dealing with specific SKU units, whether it's a VOD unit, a digital unit, or whether it's a physical unit, and you have to track those and understand them just as you would any point of sale activity. Also, there are foreign currency considerations. We do live in a global world. Unless you want to knock out 99% of your business opportunities, I encourage us all to recognize that. In fact, I even find myself caught up. I try to stay away from the words domestic versus international, because domestic is a very offensive term when I deal with my Scandinavian clients, SF in Stockholm, because they're like, what does domestic mean? The United States? That is very ethnocentric. So I try to ensure that those kind of terms that are very very US-based, and these kind of decision makings that we promulgate from the US don't insult our partners overseas in terms of standards and in terms of nomenclature. Very critical. So, as I mentioned, there's an increased complexity in the distribution channels, and there's increased complexity in the contracts, in the bundling of contracts, particularly when we deal with episodic content, and you're dealing with delivery of different episodes at different times and revenue recognition. And you're seeing greater demand for IP management across the whole global chain, right? And it used to be, well, you can narrowly say this is a TV broadcaster, this is a content creator, this is a financier, this is a film studio, this is a distributor. What is Netflix? It's all of those things, right? What is Amazon, right? What is YouTube? So, in fact, if you even look at CBS, Les Moonves, very sharp fella, what is CBS? It's also all of those things and more. And so it's really vital to have not just the content available and know what's available to be exploited, but have visibility into the performance. And the visibility into performance gives you the ability to what's that word when you look into the future? With a P? But prognosticate? Who said it? Oh, he raised his hand first, sir. I'm sorry. So he gets the award. I got something special for you, sir, at the end. So the ability to prognosticate into the future, to say, hey, this type of content sells really well on platforms in this area. So, for example, there's a lot of niche content that, for various reasons, people don't like to watch in public, let's say, but like very much to watch in private. That's all I'm going to say about that. But that sort of content, that knowing that and knowing what does well where. Now, obviously, just like mutual funds, past performance is not indicative of future behavior. But it does give you some trends. And there is, I want to say for the record, I'm not a believer in the sort of psychohistory of it all, this Asimovian notion that you can take all the components of how things have performed in the past and calculate that with sociological numbers and this number and that and predict everything. If that were the case, then our best films would be coming out of MIT. And having my sister and my nephew and everybody in my life go to MIT and work there, I can assure you they're not making wonderful films. Unless you want to see a 1,000 frame per second water drop kind of thing. That's really amazing to see the physics of that in half a second. Yeah, my sister's an aerospace engineer at MIT. Very proud of that. She's a rocket scientist. It's kind of cool. It's like, what did your sister do? My sister's a rocket scientist. She's like a 5-foot little Jewish girl from Brooklyn, and she's a rocket scientist. It's pretty cool. And she can kick your ass because she was in the armed forces too. So don't mess with my sister as the subject of this presentation. And she lives in New Hampshire, which is, live free or die. So anyway, and commutes every day to MIT. Don't ask. So again, licensing continues to drive the product, as we're saying, the revenue, and it's really critical to know that 80% of title revenue, and this is a very generic statement, so I stand behind it only in the most general terms, do not come from, comes from post-theatrical activity. And post-theatrical activity is everything except the time when we sat in the movies. I don't know about you guys, but I spend a lot of time on planes. I see, sadly, most of my films on planes, which makes me, very every film on a plane is like, oh my God, it's so great, because you might die at any moment. And not to say that to anybody here, I am flying tonight, and peace and love, I'll be fine. So you need to be able to diagnose the licensing from a standpoint of the when, the where, the what. Right? There's also a how. that's another layer, if you imagine a three-dimensional layer on top of this, that's how it's granted. Meaning, is it exclusive? Is it non-exclusive? Is it optionally available to be picked up? And here's some prescriptive notions about how we suggest you can turn effective rights management into a competitive advantage. I hear whispering. Is everything okay? I used to teach high school in New York, so I'm very sensitive to the class making fun of me. You know, got into a lot of arguments with them. Because at the time I was teaching, I looked younger than many of the students. That's why I grew the beard, just to make me look older. How am I doing? Do I look post 40 at least? Yeah, good. People said I couldn't do it. I did it. So we want to make rights management your core system to create optimization opportunities, enable efficiencies in asset distribution, reduce liabilities, because again, hey, you sold this to my competitor, you know, down the street from me, says Igor, and Vlad are fighting about it, and there's lawsuits, and that's not fun. And we try to obviate that happening. Also, you have to have complex dimensions. Again, I mentioned that this is a Rubik's Cube, but imagine a holographic Rubik's Cube that has yet other dimensions on top of it, a freaky inside-out Rubik's Cube, because the dimensions themselves have hierarchy, meaning I sell to Scandinavia. Does that imply that I sold Finland? Most answers yes. When I sold Denmark, does it imply I sold Scandinavia? Yes. If I've sold Sweden, is Iceland still available? Yes. What does that mean in the context of data management? The same thing with rights, territories, markets, channels, etc. So it's a fun, if any of you are into data modeling and data management, and I've been doing it for many years, since I was 12 actually, and I can tell you that this is the most complex, exciting model that I've seen. And one of the systems I wrote was involved with the Office of School Food and Nutrition Services in New York, distributing food to the kids who ate food in public schools, and that was less complex than this, and that was very complex. And again, we want to reunite the rights data with the enterprise to be able to increase offerings and do some what was the P word again? Prognosticate? Prognostication? Yeah, thank you. I remember because it was a spell in Dungeons and Dragons. There was that's a hip reference, right? I mean, come on. So, summary, FilmTrack, me, co-founder, CEO, exciting. FilmTrack, rights management, based in Studio City. Rights management, asset management, content management. Thesis, rights, vital, important to connect it to royalties, financials, important. Siloing, bad. Move together, good, good. And that's it. What's that, beer? Oh, the beard. Beard, good, older, more sophisticated. Fake glasses, makes me look smart. No, they're real. Et cetera, et cetera. That's it.
We'll use some questions.
That 23 minutes? I was right on that?
Yeah, you're great. So we can open to some questions here. I'm sure that a lot of people wouldn't realize how complex this is and how valuable it is at the same time. So do we have anyone?
Questions, comments, concerns?
Matt?
My sister's married, so don't even bother.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
Great stuff, man. Okay. Appreciate it.